We're rolling.
Welcome to the Buttonwoods Museum. My name is Jan Wims, and I'm the curator here at the museum. And we're really happy to have Chris Obert and the New England Authors Expo back. We did this series a couple of years ago. We called it Book Talks at the time, and we're very happy to be doing this again. What do you call it? It's the Buttonwoods Museum Authors Lecture Series. Too many words, I have to write it down. Anyway, I'm going to turn it over to Chris and let him introduce his authors. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, I'm Chris. I run the New England Authors Expo, and this is one of our events. And let's just get things started. This is K.B. Mason. He writes a series of books based out of Rye Harbor. And take it away.
Thank you. Okay. Chris, my books are mostly they're murder mysteries, call them cheesy beach reads, good vacation books. However, my protagonist, Jack Beale is his name, is a little bit challenged in his relationships, particularly with a gal named Max. And so when Chris approached me about coming in tonight to join this, since we're talking about love and romance, I said, perfect, Jack, classic case. But I thought before I would, what I'd like to do is I'm going to read a little passage from the book and then just tell you a little bit of information about myself and so on. But before I do that, there's a great range to romance in fiction. Yeah. And when I wrote my very first book, which is called Harbor Lights, I shared it during its many rewrites with some friends to just give me a sense of, did the story make sense? Were the characters believable? How's it developing? And after the 7th rewrite, a gal that I would run with, we were running with, I gave it to her to read, and she read it, and she's just one of these bright, forthright, outspoken, brilliant people. And so she had finished reading, we're running along, it's after dark, it's in the middle of the winter. She said, I finished the book. Oh, great, how'd you like it? She said, you know, you're writing a beach read, you know, and she said, it's terrific, it's a great story, but I nearly tripped on the curb when she said but, and I could not imagine what she said. And her comment was, look, you're writing a beach read. All beach reads, they've got to have a page or two where you turn the corner down, because it's juicy. You have no sex in this book. I mean, you have to. Well, I panicked. They say things that run through your head, they just fly through your head. You write what you know. Okay. And it was very stressful. But I realized that there's two approaches to this. One was a fairly graphic way of approaching it. What I would call the school of heaving bassoons and throbbing members, or bonnets with around, whatever, but not particularly good. Or you write scenes that bring the reader in, you give them enough information that they can fill in the blanks. And you know it works if they're reading it and go, and you don't have to say a whole lot to bring that out. So that's what I've tried to look towards. However, but to illustrate the form, this is a good story. I had ordered some copies of one of my books. And in the box of books was an odd book. I looked, where the hell did this come from? And this was the book that I got, Mountain Roads. Well, it's my book on the inside. They just put the wrong cover. And I looked at this and I said, now this is great. right? I'm going to share this with you. This is right. I can't write like that. When Chase Darnley received a letter from his dying stepsister in Idaho, he never hesitated before agreeing to care for Ann's daughter, his niece in all but blood. Yet Chase never dreamed that little Reagan would be a blooming young woman, just ready for plucking. How would he act the part of guardian and uncle when every tantalizing glimpse of her sweet-scented flesh set off a storm of desire in his blood? As he introduced Reagan to the rugged life of the trapper in the sparsely populated hills of Oregon, her innocence and complete trust in him seemed to mock Chase. There was no way in the world that he could keep his honor and still have a taste of his wild mountain road. Is that great? Not me. Anyway, so now we've gotten that out of the way. We'll come back to Earth. What I thought I'd do, in my books, each book begins and ends in the fictionalized town of Rye Harbor, New Hampshire. The same core cast of characters carries through all of the stories. I've written them to stand alone, but if there are references to earlier stories, they're sufficiently explained that you won't be lost. And my protagonist, his name is Jack Beale. He has an on-again, off-again relationship with a younger woman named Max. And sometimes Jack just doesn't take care of business. And Max kind of wants it. And so in the second book, Changing Tides, Max ends up running off with somebody who turned out not to be a nice person. And Jack, by the time he woke up, she was gone. And then he had to go and basically find her down in Belize. Kind of do sound like I wrote that book. But what I thought I'd read is this little section where Jack he's thinking back over the moment when he knew that he had messed up and he had lost her. And she worked in a restaurant. This fellow that was hitting on her has offered to take her to some event in the city or something. And Jack, at this point, he has his way of reacting to all of this was he would say, he got in his boat, just sail off. So he's at anchor, he's in Newport, Rhode Island, probably a little hungover, and he's thinking about things. Sheltered from the breeze by a canvas dodger, the sun was warm, and despite more coffee, he closed his eyes and was quickly transported back to Switzerland. They had a butcher. Even though it had been less than a year, it felt like a lifetime ago. Max was with him. There were small cafes, intimate dinners. He could almost feel her touch, her smell, and the joy of being with her. He smiled. Then a gull cried out, waking him as if he had been slapped. It took him a moment to regain it. It took a moment for him to regain the present. Then his thoughts drifted as he relived that day in Rye when he knew it was over. He had stopped by Ben's to ask Courtney something, what he couldn't even remember. As he turned the corner into the bar, he saw the staff was gathered around the bar, and something or someone had their attention. For a split second, things were as they had always been. As he asked, "Hey everybody, what's going on?" The collective sucking of breaths and following silence told Jack all he needed to know. Patty turned toward him, and as she did, he saw Max. She didn't move. She was standing there, still as a mannequin. Jack gazed at her, and she was all that he saw. It was as if there was a spotlight on her, and the rest of the room was dark and silent. The little black dress she was wearing was stunning in its simplicity. Thin straps flowed over her shoulders to the low-cut bodice that revealed just enough of her perfect breasts to tease and promise. Its length was short enough to highlight her legs without exposing all of their secrets. Jack had never seen Max like this before, and he was speechless. There was a calm self-confidence and a surprised look on her face. For a split second, their eyes locked, and they connected as only former lovers could. Then the moment was over. Max blushed, and the slight rosy flush that extended from her neck down to her breasts only made her all the more desirable. That's when Jack saw it. She was wearing the diamond of which Jack had saved her life, the diamond that had led to those days of bliss in Switzerland. The diamond was strung on a thin gold chain that hung just above her breast as if it was a beacon signaling, "Come to me." Before anyone could say anything, before that moment, which felt like an eternity ended, Jack turned and left. He knew then that she was lost to him and that he needed to get away. That time seemed so long ago, and at the same time, it felt as if it were yesterday. So Jack, he just runs. He realizes he screwed up big time, and he runs. And the rest of the story is how he manages to resolve things. I'm going to take all this time. I'm going to leave it at that. Like I say, what I've tried to do is, this is of the books probably the most romance here much. I think that's how Jack kind of dealt with things. Each book has been a very different kind of story. The structure of the story, the kind of story that we told, and it's been a lot of fun. I just have fun doing this. I have 5 books out. It's been 1 book a year. And so this is all very recent for me. I fell into it. Nothing I ever expected to do, planned to do, anticipated doing, but as it turned out, it's just a heck of a lot of fun. It's nice having blue invisible friends that live in your head. And, you know, if you don't like them, you kill them. If they behave, they have very nice lives. Sometimes I question my sanity, but that's what it's all about. And each story, I never know where they're going. The characters write the stories. And so there are times when I have to pretend I'm Jack, or I have to be Max, or I have to be Patty, or I have to be the little lady in the salt marsh, or whatever the characters are, and try to see how they all piece together. And I never know where a story's going while I'm writing it. It's like if you get really excited about a television series, you're like, oh man, take that as an example. The episode finishes and you can't wait for next week to see what's going to happen next. Well, that's what every day of writing is like for me. I can't wait to sit down in the morning and see what the hell these guys are going to do today. I don't know. And so off I go with it. So that's just a little, I guess, a little bit about me and this is something here. So I'm going to let Arbor take over things here. And I'll leave it to her.
Thank you. I'm going to put that there, although it's a little precarious because I've had a cold. If I start choking, I need something to help. That was a wonderful, there were so many things you said that made me think about, that sort of resonate with me in different ways. One is the whole idea of the characters writing themselves, and that, it always surprises me. And it used to surprise me when another writer said, well, the characters write themselves. How is that possible? How is it possible that you don't have an outline, like they told you in 4th grade you were supposed to have an outline, right? I don't know. And I killed off my hero once. This is my 6th book. It's also my first novel out at the time. It's set in Maine, which is probably my favorite place, and I went to Mastert Island, which is where Acadia National Park is. I don't know if any of you have been there, but I went there in 1948, which shows you I was 5 years old, so you can do the math. But it was the year after the fire. Some of you may know there was a devastating fire on the island, and I remember being driven down this road, and on one side there was just beautiful green and the mountains and the clouds and the sky, and on the other side it was this seared, charred, black stumps of trees. And I used to, when we were home in Washington and I was a kid, I would just dream of this island. And sometimes I would have nightmares that my island was on fire. So Island of Time is a love story, and it's a love story set in a place that I love. And so it's a story about loving a place. But it's also, I'm an anthropologist by training, and I like stories about people who just kind of miss each other. They're coming from different cultures, they're looking from different perspectives. And when I was a summer kid, the year-round people really didn't exist. When I was a year-round summer person, which was a very different and important status, probably the best one I've ever had, we moved, my former husband and I moved to Maine, and we lived in the same village where I'd been a summer kid. And I learned that I was a year-round summer kid when I walked into the pharmacy and in the fall, and I said hello to the pharmacist, and he said, hello, Mrs. X, and I said, come on, I'm Barbara. And there was this long pause, and he said, I guess I could call you Barbara. You're a year-round summer person now. But in the spring, I'll have to call you Mrs. So this is a story of an adolescent summer girl who is there with her family from New York. And she's had some struggles. And I used to teach in a boys' high school, and I think that most adolescents have had some struggles. Anne Lamott says if you've survived childhood, you've got something to write about. She's an adolescent who's had some difficulties, and she meets the son of a lobsterman. I think what I'll do is just read you when they meet, and then I'll talk a little bit more about me writing. So what's happening here, if you've been to Mastert Island, you may remember that there's a fjord, or they now call it a fjord, I don't know what the difference is, that splits the island. The island looks a lot like this little charm, which is the island, or like a horseshoe, and the fjord splits the island. So they're bringing the dock up to the summer people's, or the float up to the summer people's dock. And on this boat are the lobsterman, the lobster boat, and his Captain Bunker, who actually was a real guy, and his grandson. And so the boy rowed the skiff to the wide rocks of the tide pools that ran flat into the ocean below, faced the bow into the shore, waited for a wave, and pulling hard against the water, shot the boat over onto the ledge. Before the next wave, he hopped out, grabbed the coil of rope, and then pulled his boat from the water and tied it to the gray hulk of a dead tree cast up on the rock. I saw him walk over to a tide pool and slowly kneeled beside it, but I turned away to watch the men, scared he would think I was interested in him or what he was doing. To the far right, I could still see the boy as he knelt on the shiny rock, poised above the pool of water. I watched as he darted his hand in the tide pool to bring up something wriggling in his palm, and then let the creature run up and down his arm along the rock before he placed it gently back in the water. I watched as he looked over towards where I was standing, spat over his shoulder into the water, shrugged, and then started to walk toward us. Daddy turned to me and said, "Get your life preserver, it's in the car." "Oh, Daddy," I moaned, "it's so stupid." "Becky, there's no one here to see, and you'll feel really stupid if you fall off the dock and can't swim." I lowered my eyes, my face reddening, and walked towards the car. I was looking at the ground, but I took only a few steps before I stumbled against the boy. All I could see were his torn sneakers with a different colored lace in each shoe. But I heard him say, "I'm sorry, miss, I didn't see you." It was enough. In that fraction of a second, I felt time stop. I smelled the sweet, clean salt and felt the warmth of his breath. I felt terrified and safe simultaneously, but shocked, frozen like a tiny rabbit crouching in fear. When I looked up and into his eyes, I was mesmerized. They were blue like the sea, the colors changing in the light of the sun. He put out his hand and touched my shoulder to balance us both, but then backed away quickly, lowering his hand to his side. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you," he repeated, and then stepped aside and almost ran to the top of the ramp before I could answer. My breath caught in my throat and I could feel my heart pounding. I thought it was so loud everyone would hear it. I could still trace his hand on my shoulder as I walked slowly to the car and got the orange life jacket and turned to walk back to the dock. So there's a bunch of things going on there. One is this sort of magic. I hope everybody here has had a first love. And there's this magical adolescent hormone burst that just knocks you out. And it's beyond reason. And so that's what I'm trying to capture here. It doesn't make sense, but it's so powerful. The other thing that you might have caught is when Daddy says, "Becky, there's no one here to see you." Well, of course there are, 2 or 3 people there to see them, but they don't matter. So it's the story of adolescent love, and like as you were saying, relationships don't bloom and keep blooming. they wither and die and come back. And I had my slight digression here, but digression, not discretion. I went back to graduate school when I was 50 because I had been running a construction and real estate company with my former husband, who was seriously ill with eating disorder and died of that last year. And I was doing a doctoral program, and I knew I had to write a dissertation. And I heard that there was a course you could take that was a 2-week course, 8 credits, in and out, and I thought, perfect. I can get back to work in Maine. The first assignment was to respond to an essay titled On Food and Happiness. And I thought, oh dear God, what am I going to do? I have invested 2.5 years in trying to get myself out of the life I don't like. What am I going to do? And so I thought, after a long time, I thought, okay, I'm going to write on food and unhappiness. And I did, and the professor said, this is a pretty amazing story. I then got 8 more credits, writing 90 pages of the story. You always got to go for twopers, right? And that turned into a book that paid my way through graduate school. Great, so I kind of backed into writing, and it all seemed so simple until HarperCollins bought William Morrow and fired everybody I'd worked with for 3 years, and that was sort of the end of that. Then I wrote for, so Bitter Ice was out, and it was doing okay, even without any help from HarperCollins. And I thought, well, I don't want to be just a one-book author. I want to write a bunch of books and different kinds of books. So I wrote this book, but that was a long time ago. That's like 12 years ago now. And I wrote it as 2 parts. Part 1, Becky is an adolescent. Part 2, Becky is an older woman. And, will she get back together with Ben or will she not? And I did kill him off. I thought, this is such a wonderful love story. And there's lots of juicy parts. There's not lots of juicy parts, but there are some juicy parts. And I thought, this is great. I'm really loving this. This is so nice. I really got to kill him off because, love doesn't last and nothing goes on forever. And then my agent at the time said, Barbara, this is such a wonderful man. You can't kill him off. And I thought, oh, come on. That's not the way life works. And I sat down, and I remember sitting in front of my computer, just feeling like what a surly adolescent kid saying, I'll show her. I'm going to write the stupidest ending that you've ever seen in this book. And it sounded a lot like the thing that you read, except that the guy died. And then I started thinking more about, maybe he doesn't have to die. he really is a nice man. Why am I killing this guy off? And he was kind of fighting to stay on the page. So anyhow, I put it all aside because I got hired to write for foundations and for a government book on education and some other stuff like that. And that was paying the bills, and so this went into the computer. I then got hired to teach writing, about which I knew very little. But I had written a book that somebody liked, and so that was great. I don't want to sound as if I wasn't, my own advocate in some ways, because I think women get accused of being very passive and would just say, oh, we didn't do anything, we just kind of got led along. It's a wonderful book by Kay James, and I can't remember who it was by, but anyhow. So I went back to this book about 3 years ago, but instead of writing it in two parts, I decided I would splice it together, because I thought, A, that was much more interesting, and the juxtaposition of the two, there are these sort of, you build up the story by layering. It isn't just kind of chronological. And I found a publisher in Maine. My publisher of the previous book said, a novel? Come on, you gotta be kidding. Nobody's publishing novels. So I felt very lucky to find this small publisher in Maine. And so I hope you will like it. I hope you'll read it and enjoy it. And Haverhill is very dear to me at the moment because Gail Henney, who does a wonderful program, she's a really good interviewer. One of the great things about her is she reads the book, and then she asks really good questions. And she's from Haverhill Community Television, and so the interview I did with her is going to be shown actually now at about 20-25 stations up and down the East Coast. And I was really proud to follow Paul Harding, who of course won the Pulitzer Prize for his book and his first book, and Bernona Barry. So she interviews some wonderful people. So I think got enough of me, or would you like more? I'm looking forward to the Q&A because I have a rule with Q&A, which is you can ask anything you want as long as I retain the right to say no, I don't feel like answering that. So great, I think I'll turn it over to Kim. Good.
Thank you, Doug, thank you, Barb, for a wonderful, wonderful talk that I now have to follow. Well, where should I start? Probably what got me into this. I have been writing ever since I could hold a pencil, ever. And reading was about as long. I started out with Disney princess stories, moved on to Nancy Drew novels, then on to romance novels. So when I started writing, it kind of made sense that followed the same progression. I started with princess stories, moved on to murder mysteries, and then on to romance novels. Because I'm really interested in the stories of a gospel love, of a hopeless romantic. I have to have a happy ending or else we'll go. Thanks a lot. But reading those romance novels when I was younger, it was very much like Doug was talking about. You've got these plot strippers that have very little plot whatsoever, which for me didn't work. I would just roll my eyes. This is so boring. It was the really thick ones, the 300, 400 pages that had all the plot and suspense and everything that came with it, plus all the juicy parts that really held my interest. So this was kind of my mindset. I was about 16 years old when the idea for this book came to me, and the way that it came to me, I swear to you, is in a dream. I got nods. This has happened to other people, which is interesting. It was seriously a car chase, a murder in an alley, and a very racy scene in the bathroom. I'm like, what would possibly connect these together? So I started coming up with this story that connected them all together. So that was when I was 16, and I wrote it after I finished all my homework, which was very late at night. I was one of those straight-A students. So I would write this thing on pink ink, on pink paper in longhand, and store the manuscript under my mattress, because God forbid anyone finds this thing ever, ever. The only person who ever did read it was my best friend on the planet, Quinn, at the time, and she really enjoyed it. She said, Kim, you've got something here, you really need to go with it, because she'd read just about everything I'd ever written, like all the princess stories and murder mysteries and all that stuff. Like, you're on something, so keep at it. So I did, but the problem is that life does get in the way. You start when you're 16, but you're going to college after that, you get the first job after that. So it got shelved for a very, very, very long time. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I picked it up again. Found the pink paper version, brought it into the 20th century on a laptop, of all amazing things. Got about 60 pages into it after transcribing everything, and got stuck at writer's block. Just in time to move to Seattle and try another part of my business and travel in the world while you still can when you're young. Didn't touch it for another 5 years. Just sat there in the back of my head. It's always in the back of my head. Characters are always talking to me, telling me what they want to do. I have the outline in my head, but I haven't ever had a chance to really write it at that point in time. So, fast forward this 5 years later, and I'm cleaning my apartment in Portsmouth. Find the old laptop. Open it up and read it. Okay. Here's where I got stuck. What's the worst thing I can possibly do? Write a sentence. Hit the delete key if it's horrible. From that point on, this was about 2 years ago, I have just been living, breathing, sleeping, eating this whole story. It pretty much took over my life. So I wrote my romance novel. And what it is it's got all the juicy parts, but it's also got that thick plot and romance that I'm after. Because I feel like there's a market for this. I feel like women want the very sexy story. They want the juicy stuff, but they want something that doesn't insult their intelligence. And they also want something that treats those juicy parts with class. They don't want the quivering members and the heaving bosoms and all that stuff. It's a very fine line. It's very hard to do, to get that just right between bogus corn cheese and hot. Very hard to do. And I think I've kind of got this with this book. This is what my cover looks like. But no blood strippers, nothing's hanging out. I think it's very, very mature. It's part suspense, it's part mystery, it's definitely part romance. I think what I'm going to do is read the back of the book to you, because this is a very complicated story. I'm about the hopeless romantic, there has to be a happy ending type thing, but there's no, in this case, there's no first meeting. There's none of that kind of typical romance stuff, because what my heroine is, she's a journalist, and she's investigating a monster. So they both know of each other. She's already brought down one crime family because of what she does for a living, so the monster already knows who she is. She definitely knows who he is, so there's no real, I don't know who you are. So it's complicated from the beginning. And it's almost this kind of Romeo and Juliet type of situation where you've got the star-crossed lovers, but somehow they're going to make it work. So I'm going to read this back of the book, and we'll go from there. Driven by the ghost of her past, New York Times journalist Solana Trent lives for one goal: to bring down the mob. After her first successful expose destroyed one crime family, she now has her sights set on another, namely the notorious syndicate spearheaded by the charismatic, devastatingly handsome acquisition mogul Ray Matheson. While Solana is astonished to discover the true extent of Matheson's power, more startling is their magnetic attraction to each other. Seduced by the scent of the story, Solana raises the stakes on her hunt for Matheson, but when her reckless ambition lands her in the mob boss's crosshairs, she becomes the hunted in the game for her life. A battle of wits and wills ensues, culminating in a passionate encounter neither one of them had anticipated. Solana realizes there's much more to the intense, complicated man she's been investigating, whereas Matheson finds himself entertaining unorthodox plans for the beautiful, dangerous journalist instead. He makes her a shocking offer, and her decision changes their lives in the landscape of New York's underground forever. No decent honor and no anything like that. So I think I hit that with that. But the question is, for me, was, now that I have this manuscript, what am I going to do with it? And I was lucky enough to do a whole lot of research and have a lot of friends who were also kind of doing this research for me because they knew how passionate I was about this and getting it out there. Because I was wondering what I should do. Should I go the publishing route? Or should I go about this newfangled self-publishing thing that I keep hearing about? Research goes evidence. And the way that the old, and I don't know how many writers there are in this room who know this, but the way that the old way of doing it is like this. You get a publisher by doing it this way. First of all, you query agents. Your first step is querying for an agent. Sending out rejection letters, not rejection letters, but they become that way. You send out your queries, they come back as rejections until you land one. Then once you get the agent, they send out letters to publishers. You have like rejection letters until you land one. This can take years to do. Whereas here you have this manuscript ready to go, ready for the world at large. Whereas the self-publishing route, kind of new way of doing things, you hit a button, it's done. You're out in the world. So I went through Amazon's Create Space to do this, and they made it very, very easy and cost-effective for anybody who's on a manuscript to do this, which I thought was wonderful. It's kind of doing what I think iTunes did for the music industry. It's putting the power in the hands of people to get their work out there. So that's what I did, and I've been very happy with it. I'm OCD control freak psycho. I didn't want to go through a small house and have to relinquish control of my cover art, and you have to change your first sentence, and we don't like this, and we don't want to do that. So I gave it to a whole bunch of my friends who are equally dramatically crazy as I am. Very trusting, and they are very, very brutal with their comments.
She's looking at me there.
Very brutal with their comments, so I can trust them. And I think it paid off. I published it in July. I have, I think, about 500 out in print between Kindle and regular print. And I've got 41 reviews, 39 of which are 5 stars and 2 of which are 4. So I've been very happy. I think the Thinking Woman's romance novel has places to go in this world of publishing, and we'll see where it goes.
Great.
Thank you. And with that, let's go to the
I'm really thrilled to be here with fellow writers, readers, and lovers of romance. I assume everybody is a lover of romance. I am a super romance lover. I love the happy ever after ending, romantic at heart, love and finding true love as the main driving force of a story. But, as you said, and it's not the only thing that drives the story. It's not just about the two people. So, most of my novels are murder, suspense, somewhat little thriller thrown in, and boy meets girl and fall in love. Obviously, there's lots of obstacles, lots of conflict, lots of funny. I have to write funny. And the world's set in Boston. Boston's, I guess it's kind of like a second home to me. I've worked there for like 20 years of my life, and I just felt very comfortable putting all my stories there. And so and it's even become more of like home to me since I've done that. I just, don't you get that? If you start writing about a place, it's almost even more familiar than if you even lived there, because you just, well, Boston's not a fictional place, so I use real locations, but I also make up some spots as well. I don't get crazy about turning right on the street, turn left on it, but I don't know, some people do that, but so I like to take a real place and add a creative touch to it as well. I have a series of books. They're connected, not all the same people though. They're connected in theme sort of plot called the Scotland Yard Exchange series, and it started with a detective from Scotland Yard who's kind of thrown out, put in exile, sent to Boston where he was originally from. And but his best friend is on the Boston Police Department. So he's given another chance to salvage his career, and that's how it starts. And so they start this exchange program. And I'm told, in real life, there is an actual exchange program that Scotland Yard has, only with New York Police Department. So I felt like this was not too big a stretch. And so the series is about different mix and match of police from Boston and Scotland Yard transferring back and forth. The second book, The Hot Shots, is about a detective. Scotland Yard actually has a number of departments in it, and one of them is for terrorism, anti-terrorism. And so this particular guy is on the run from terrorists, and so they send him over to Boston so that he can be safe. But of course, the evil terrorist follows him. So I have fun, humor, and some adventure thrown in with the romance, and it's very lighthearted. There's no, it's probably the kind of thing you want to read when you're in a bad mood or when you're in a sad mood, and it will lift you. It'll lift your spirits to have something just very lighthearted, and that's, I guess, what I write. I like to read those stories. I like to, I hate horror. I would never read horror. Stephen King is the opposite of Stephanie Queen, or the other way around. And so that's what I say. That's my motto. Stephanie Queen will be the opposite. I do the lighthearted, not uncomplex. There's the plot, and I'm jealous of those of you who can write just into your pants, because there's no way I can do that. I started out that way, and then I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I have to plot it out. I have to use some logic and have it. I don't know how you do that with a murder mystery, because I have to really kind of figure out, okay, when are they going to find this, and what's the clue that's going to lead there, and how is that going to work logistically. I have to sit back and figure that out at some point, and then move on with the real fun part, which is the relationship. and I have a lot of fun with banter, and I know not everybody loves it, but it's one of my favorite things that I put in my notes is the romantic banter and the get that heightened intensity of the flirting, and that's probably the most juicy stuff in my book, more even so than, the physical, the kissing, whatever. And I have my book's evenly divided, some with all the juicy stuff behind closed doors. Basically, it leads up and then fades away. And then the other half, where the juicy stuff gets on the page, and you can experience some of that as well. So it depends probably on my mood, or the story, which way I'm going to go on that. So I don't know, maybe if I don't follow all the rules on romance strictly that way. I know they categorize romances on explicitness level, and so mine kind of go in all directions. But I guess I just have to satisfy my own mood. And so I figure if I'm enjoying writing it, and then there's half a chance that readers will enjoy writing the stories, reading stories as well. So that's what I do. Just a little word about my background. I did start writing when I was very young. When I went to Catholic school, in grade school, and then I started up in newspaper. And so I was in second grade, and everybody in the class had to write a short story. And I wrote one about an elephant. There was no romance. But they liked it, so they put it into the newspaper. So I was thrilled with that. And so ever since then, it was just one of those a romantic notion I had in my head of being a writer and writing novels, and I started probably about when I was in sixth grade, I started another novel, and it was a murder mystery romance. The guy got killed by poison lipstick. And I never finished that one, and then like when I was 14, I started another novel, and this was a science fiction romance where there was a man from Venus. Anyway, sorry. But I never did finish that one either. But I did keep wanting to do it, and so I ended up doing it in between all of life, like everybody else. So now I have 6 books published, which I did self-publish because I am not getting any younger, and I did not want to, take that time. Although it is a very rigorous process because you do have to still have the editing, you still have to have the proofing, you still have to do the covers, which I enjoy all of that, which actually I have an entrepreneurial bent to me. I didn't realize I had, but now I'm enjoying that too. So I guess I'm lucky to enjoy both sides of that, the entrepreneurial and the creative writing part. And so I have my 7th book, which is being written now, which is the 4th in my Valentine exchange series, and it's called Beachcombers. And it's on Martha's Vineyard, which is a slight departure, I know, from Boston, but close enough. And it does feature, there's always overlap in the cast of characters, but there's always new romance and new romantic couples introduced in each one. So there's like a new couple love story to each one with supporting cast, and it just makes me feel like I'm part of their community and like I'm hanging out with my friends. So I guess that's common thread here with all our writers. And I appreciate hanging out with you guys tonight. Thank you.
Do you want to do a question and answer segment?
Yeah.
Would you like to? Do you want to ask a question? We put 4 chairs up front.
Yeah.